Take a look at the first chapter, which is here, and this is just to get you oriented, some real world incidents, and it's kind of funny. This is from Mandia, and these are famous hacks from a few years back, and they try not to tell you what company it is, but it's really easy to guess which company it is. So in general, if you have a network, there are events. Events are bad things that happen on a network, like a hard drive is full, a machine is broken, a network connection goes down. Now those are not security incidents. Those are just events that are handled by like an IT team. You replace a component and get back on the road. But a security incident is a much more serious thing. That's a violation of your security policies. You got malware on a system, private data has been stolen and left the network, that sort of thing. So that's declaring an incident is a big deal. It's just like if you have fire extinguishers and you have fire drills and such, and then there is some occasion on which you declare we actually have a fire, and then you call the fire department and guys go through with coats and oxygen masks and everything. Somebody has to declare that this is not just a threat. We now have a serious problem that requires response. That's an incident, and for that you need incident response. So incident response, the first thing is you have to decide if whatever is going on is serious enough to be really count as a security incident. Then the first issue is to contain it. You have to decide how big is it. If some machines are getting infected with malware or they're under hostile control of attackers, the first question is how big is the problem? Have they taken over the whole network, or have they taken over just a few devices so we can just disconnect them and limit the harm? Just like preventing the fire from spreading. Then you determine the scope, which is how big is the problem and how much do we have to fix. This is how most companies that don't have a good incident response team, they don't know what to do. The IT tech tries to do things, the end users try to do things, and they get a disjointed response that doesn't solve the problem. So what you have to do is develop a professional team that will give people facts and actual information and resolve it with minimum disruption to the business and the network. So you try not to have more outage than necessary, and you try not to harm the business any more than necessary. Your business may end up in headlines saying you've been hacked. People may lose confidence in you. Your stock price may fall. All these bad things may happen. But the goal of incident response is to minimize all those bad effects. So you try to minimize damage to the corporation, restore normal operations, manage public perception with careful statements to the press and such, and get ready for legal action. You may be gathering evidence if you actually want to prosecute the perpetrators. Most companies just don't bother with that at all because they came in over the network. You don't know who they are. It's hard to find out who they are, and if you did, they're probably in another nation anyway, so it's mostly just a waste of time. But you do have to work with your management and then enhance your security posture so this can't happen again. So you try to find out the root cause, which is what is the weakness that let this happen, and you patch it so they can't come in that way again. Now, there was an innocent time on the internet until about 10 years ago when most companies believed they were not getting hacked. And they thought they had firewalls and intrusion detection systems, and we just don't have to worry about getting hacked because we're preventing it. But that is over. Now the weapons are so dangerous and the hackers are so powerful that everybody gets hacked. So you just have to accept it, just like employee theft or fires in the building or people getting sick. It's just a problem that's going to happen, and you have to have a response plan to deal with it instead of imagining that you can somehow have none of these problems. Let me just check for, okay, no questions, all right. All right, so you have an incident response team. You have an investigation team. The various teams work together. The investigation team are people that determine what happened and determine what damage has been done, and that's primarily done by looking through log files and an SIEM like Splunk, Security Information and Event Manager system. Then you have a remediation team. Once you have decided what happened, then you have a remediation event where you fix all the affected servers at once and you fix the vulnerability so the attacker will lose all their footholds into your network and they won't be able to come back if you do it correctly. This is very difficult, and very often it fails, and you have to do another investigation and another remediation because you didn't really find all of their remote controls. But that's the idea. And then you've got a public relations and legal all through this, informing your staff, your investors, your stakeholders, the public at large, the government agencies that oversee you. You know, there's a lot of people, if you're a big, important company, that want information about this, and you have to have a public relations and legal team working to saying the right thing to all those people at the right time. There was an incident at this college maybe 15 years ago, we had a crooked chief technology officer who was just a lunatic and pretty much a crook. He got in charge, and he had a plan. He'd done it at many colleges. He created a fake virus outbreak so he could fire his buddy to come in at a high price and pretend to fix it. And he had intimidated most of the official staff so they wouldn't complain, and I became sort of the head man of the lynch mob getting rid of him. And because my students had done a security assessment of the college as part of one of these classes, and I knew that what he was saying was not true. He claimed he had hundreds of viruses and they'd been there for 10 years, and I said, I know we don't have a problem that big. And we didn't have a problem that big. So, but what he did was he announced this straight to the Chronicle and brought in a Chronicle reporter before he told anybody at the college. So people woke up in the morning and the headlines in the Chronicle are City College hacked, viruses everywhere. Now people call in, should I come into work? Should I log in? Do I need a new credit card? And nobody knew anything. He wouldn't tell them anything. And when you ask him, he would say, I'm preserving the evidence for an FBI investigation, and I won't tell you anything. We're like, this is not how you do it. This is the opposite. If you have a problem, you talk to your management. You talk to your IT staff. You decide what you've got. Then your management issues, useful information. Your customers, your employees will want to know what's happening. They will want to know what to do. Is it safe to use my machine? Should I come into work at all? You have to have intelligent answers to these questions. And of course, you involve your lawyers, because if you say things that are false, they could lead to trouble later. If you admit to things that you shouldn't really admit to, that's why, your public relations is a big part of this. You have a problem, and how you handle it will change everything. That's why I use a lot of companies that have been hacked. Cloudflare, for example, has been hacked several times, and I think they're an excellent company because they have excellent response. Every time Cloudflare goes out, or they have a security incident, within one day they have a complete explanation. Here's what happened, here's what caused it, here's how we fixed it. That's the best you can do. You might think you could do business with people that don't get hacked, but there's no such thing. There's people who know they got hacked and people who don't know they got hacked. And the people who know they got hacked and are transparent and open about how they dealt with it are the ones that are doing the best anybody can do. And let's see, any more questions here? None. Okay, all right, anyway, so, all right. So live response, I'm teaching a computer forensics course, and some of that is the old-fashioned computer forensics. The old rule in computer forensics was you kick out the plug, shut down the power, then you take out the hard drive and image it, and that's your evidence. The reason they did that is because only things stored on the hard drive have a timestamp and an owner. Things in RAM do not have a timestamp and an owner, so you don't really know who put it there or where it came from. So the attitude was, that's not important. If what you're trying to do is prosecute a human using that machine, they thought that was useless. But in incident response, it's the opposite. In the first place, in incident response, we're not trying to prosecute the computer user. They're probably just a victim. And in the second case, we need to know what's going on right now on that machine. Running malware, live network connections, files downloading and uploading, those are important to us. And if you turn off the machine, you would lose all that information. And so you normally don't want a hard disk image because it's way too much data. Gigabytes of data that you have to spend a week hunting through. What you want is a small amount of carefully chosen information that will help you find out what's happening, like a list of all the running processes, a list of all the network connections, things like that. So you perform this thing called live analysis. This should be more, I think. Got some typos in here. All right. So live forensics is something that is possibly troublesome. There was a time in computer forensics when it was this wonderful field where everything is perfect. You have the hard drive, the power is off, you image it through a write blocker, and now you get a complete copy of it and you put an MD5 hash on it. And then anybody can make a copy of that. It will never change. That is the evidence, a perfect object. So the computer forensic people got used to expecting that. But in live forensics, you do something much sloppier. You have a running machine with the power on, with processes running, with network traffic. You now add more software to that machine, and you run commands on that machine, and you take information from it, like a list of running processes, list of files, list of users, things like that. So you are actually modifying that machine while you're collecting the data. This seemed sloppy and improper and unacceptable to old-fashioned computer forensic people, but they just needed to grow up, because if you're doing the other kind of forensic, like taking blood from a crime scene, you have to swab up the blood and then test it. You are changing the evidence in order to test it. And that is your job as a forensic expert, is to understand, now when I examine it, there are going to be things that I put there and things that the perpetrator put there. And I have to be enough of an expert to tell the difference. And that's the case with live response. You run software on the possibly compromised machine, you get information, and now you will find some information that you put there by performing the collection, and some information that was already there when you arrived, and you have to be smart enough to know the difference. But now you get what you need for instant response. Yeah?
Is it standard to like isolate the computer to like a different network or something like that?
You can do a lot of things. Typically in the containment phase, you just break network connections to isolate that part of the network that's infected. But now in malware analysis, they actually connect it to a fake internet sometimes,
Right.
but you don't normally do that in instant response.
Okay.
But you might. Now, some things like this have happened, like Mandiant. There's something Mandiant often had trouble. I've had some Mandiant guests talk about this, is that the typical IT person says, just re-image the servers and get back to work. And the problem is, that doesn't find out how they get in. They'll just reinfect the new and the problem, what's very hard to convince management is we have to not do anything for like a couple of weeks while we do investigation. And in that time, the attacker might be doing further harm. Now, if you just isolate those systems, the attacker will no longer get the signals from them, and they'll know you're onto them. And what you want is you want to sneakily investigate without the attacker finding out until you've figured out what to do, and then you have one eradication event where you patch everything, re-image everything, remove the vulnerability. That's how you get rid of them. But this means you have to tolerate letting the attack continue for a period of time. And in one case, they had an attack that was happening, I think it's coming up here, and the person was stealing credit card numbers right away. So they added a script to corrupt those credit card numbers. So the connection continued, and they were getting data, but the data was no longer usable, hoping that they would be fooled into thinking it was just a temporary network problem. And that's the sort of thing you do. Just like cops do, right? When they're going on some gang and they find some gang members, but instead of arresting the first one, they follow them around sneakily, trying to find out what's happening and letting the crime continue for a while you get the evidence you need to do an effective response. It's a very good question. Yeah, all right. So did that guy get sacked? He got sacked but not prosecuted. In fact, he sued the college and they paid him off. But you know, that's what amounts to success around here. All right, so here's the first case. Here's a company that they had a SQL injection vulnerability on their web server, which is very common. It's one of the top 10 vulnerabilities people have. And this was in a small business unit purchased by the parent organization. This is, by the way, extremely common. You might have a nice secure company, but you acquire another company. And now you connect all their systems to yours, and their stuff might be old and insecure, and it will take a while to bring it up to your standards. So now they achieved command execution on there using XP command shell, which is a standard way to get a command prompt from a SQL injection. And so they put malware on the database server and started executing it. All right, they did have a demilitarized zone, which is pretty good security posture. So people that come in from the internet don't get immediately into the internal environment where your really valuable stuff is. They get into the public part of your network, which is not supposed to contain any super important data. It's for public things like your web servers. But they got in here. All right, and now, so the attacker spent weeks performing recon. This is when you know you're dealing with experts. Script kiddies just run one attack, deface one page, and leave. Experts like enemy military and large crime groups spend time casing you out. Just like I said, the defender will spend time trying to investigate and find out what the criminal did. The criminal will spend time investigating the company they're attacking to plan their attack. So for the first week, they used SQL injection, then they put in a backdoor, then they found an administrator account, and they were able to get local admin on most systems. This is actually a very common problem. Most Windows systems are made from an image, and the image typically has the same administrator hash everywhere. There is a tool called Swarm that customizes every image you make from it to prevent this, but not everybody's using it. All right, so then now we talk about what attackers do, and here's one of the earliest attempts to sort of make this scientific. All security pretty much comes from the military. Of course, the military pretty much invented security, and all cybersecurity is just, a minor variation on military security. So here's the Lockheed Martin kill chain. First, you do reconnaissance, investigating the target. Then you do weaponization, you have some way to attack it. Then you deliver the weapon, and now you do an exploit. Now you have some ability to control some part of that network. You install something that's putting malware on it. Then you have a command and control center outside, so you have continuous command to send in commands and execute them on the target, and then you achieve your objective, whatever it is: stealing credit card numbers, erasing the servers, breaking physical hardware, whatever you're trying to do here. This is the Lockheed Martin kill chain, which is one of the earlier attempts to sort of organize your thoughts here. The MITRE ATT&CK is the more modern one. This is the one that's really up to date. This is the modern replacement, really, of that. And it's pretty much the same with a few more steps. You got reconnaissance, resource development, where you acquire machines and tools necessary. Then you get initial access, which typically means you send a phishing email and you trick somebody into clicking on it. So now you have some control over some machine. It's probably not administrator rights and probably not a very important machine. It's probably some machine somebody was using in a chat room or something, but you're in. Now you execute code on it. Then you figure out how to stay on it even as they reboot that machine. And perhaps even if they make some attempt to clean it off, that's persistence. Then you try to escalate your privileges. You probably have a non-administrator account on an endpoint device, so you try to escalate to administrator or domain administrator, or then you try to evade what defenses there are, steal credentials to move around to other systems, perform discovery to map out whether the servers are available from the inside, and then do lateral movement, where you hop from machine to machine to machine, taking over more and more, wandering through the network. And then you collect, you have command and control systems on the outside controlling your attackers in there, and you have, you collect data, and then you exfiltrate the data, which can be very difficult. Professional systems have data loss prevention systems. This is how China got caught when they hacked Google in 2010. China hacked Google in 2010, and they started stealing information because what they really cared about was Google's pen register data. Google had a special server just for law enforcement requests about who was sending email to other people. And China wanted that so they could find out who was conspiring against the government in China. So they hacked in and took it, and then they packaged it up and started sending it to a server in China, and that's how they got caught. They did all the attack without Google noticing, but when they sent it back to China, their data loss prevention system said, here is our data, it is going to this server in China, which is not one of our servers. That's when that set up a red flag. Why is our stuff going to a server that is not ours in China? So some people are watching the outgoing data. It can be quite difficult to exfiltrate the stuff you stole without getting caught. You might have to encrypt it and put it in little packets and mix it in with other traffic, trying to sneak it out of the network. And then, of course, you have your impact. You achieve whatever you came here to achieve, which might be just disrupting the network. It might be stealing something. It might be implanting something. The SolarWinds attack a couple of years ago was devastating because the Russians hacked into the commercial company SolarWinds, which is used by many large companies for remote administration of their networks, and they changed the code in their development environment so their official update included Russian malware. So people would install the official signed update from the commercial company, and now they're owned by the Russians. That was devastating. And these are becoming more and more common, supply chain attacks, where you actually compromise official software right inside the company. That's pretty bad and hard to stop. And normally you trust stuff that comes from the official source. Otherwise, you will go mad. Anyway, so they exploited the domain controller and put a keylogger on it. Now they were able to record the key presses, and they got a bunch of administrator accounts. So they could really go pretty much anywhere. And so by mid-February, they now had 20 backdoors using 3 different kinds of malware all over the place, and they made a custom malware creation kit to put on a lot of different malware around. So these guys are really powerful attackers. This is not one teenager. This is a serious criminal enterprise with a lot of skills and a lot of patience, and they're after a lot of money. So they took full control of the system. They got into the remote desktop protocol. They encrypted their command and control traffic, and they used persistence with DIL order hijacking, which we're going to do in the malware analysis course. We're going to practice developing attacks with these techniques. And now they made a proxy because they had the problem that the network was segmented. So when they found the thing that contained the goodies, they couldn't go directly to the internet. It had to go through the official channels. So they had to put unauthorized proxies in between to forward the traffic, to sneak the traffic off the network. And then they had this tunneled the command and control traffic through traffic that would appear to be DNS queries. Often you use DNS queries or HTTP requests, so they appear to be innocent to the company's firewall, but inside them there's encoded data. And so in March, they've been in here for a couple of months. They've stolen data several times, and they have information about your financial systems. So now they finally decided to steal your data. They made an outgoing FTP connection, and they compressed the data using compression, and then they had a jump server. So they came in through your DMZ, they got your internal environment, there was a jump server, there was another segmented network that had the financial data, like credit card numbers, and they had to compromise this jump server to get there because the company was smart, right? They had layers of defenses. There's the public stuff, there's the low importance private stuff, and the financial stuff has yet another barrier. That's what you're supposed to do, but they spent months mapping it out. And all this time, the company doesn't know what's happening. That's what's horrible. So they wanted to steal credit card numbers. So they stole the PCI data, which is the credit card numbers, and they compromised it. And they were able to compromise all these machines. And so it took them 2 months finding the systems that processed the cardholder information and finding systems with direct internet connections and mapping a path to sneak the credit card numbers back off. So this is almost certainly the Target hack, which was really big. It was the biggest hack at the time. They stole a ton of money from Target machines. That's what it sounds like to me, but I think I knew a little more years ago which one it was. It's a few years back. Anyway, they found all these machines, and they made a complicated network where the stolen financial data is here, and it sneaks out to the jump server here, goes to email, and that went out to the command and control server. So, it's pretty horrifying. You think this could be happening at your company, and you probably wouldn't know for a long time. And at least as of about 5 years ago, most companies never detect an attack at all. They mostly find out because the FBI finds out, and they grab people and they take their server, and then they find stuff on the server. That's what happened in 2010 with Google. Google figured out that China was hacking them. So they hacked them back, which, by the way, was illegal. And I brought this up with a visiting Secret Service agent. They said, yeah, we told Google not to do that, but we didn't prosecute them. So they hacked into the Chinese server and stole it back. This is like the Wild West, right? You shoot me, I shoot you back. You'd like to think there's like cops and laws, but on the internet, there pretty much aren't. And so when they stole it back, they found 30 other companies' data on there, Microsoft, Adobe. So Google then contacted them, hey, dude, the Chinese hacked you, and you didn't even notice. We at least noticed. And that's what most companies do. They don't find out at all until it's all over, and then the FBI tells them, hey, these guys stole your data. So, you'd like to do better than that. All right. So they used the PS Suite, which is a sysinternals Microsoft tool, and they used it to make an archive to see running processes. Well, see, the thing is, if you were to just dump all the data you could find, it would be huge and you'd get caught. What you want to do is carefully find the data you want. All they wanted was credit card numbers, so they looked in RAM to find the credit card numbers, and they put in a custom binary called Card Harvest that would search the RAM and then get just the credit card numbers out of it, and then encrypt it and save it to a local file. So you have a small file with just the good data, and then you sneak that out in little bits. So over the next 3 months, so I think we're up to 5 or 6 months of compromise, and they stole millions of cardholder records from all 90 systems. So after 10 months of exploitation, somebody finally noticed all this going on. So that's pretty horrifying. For 10 months, the bad guys are crawling through your network doing God knows what. Somebody finally noticed that a mail server is making an outgoing connection to an HTTP server, again, in a foreign country, not one of ours. Say, why is my server sending data to this foreign country? That's what did it. Just like I say, Google said, why is our stuff going to China? We didn't intend for that. So now they finally figured out there was a compromise, and they decided they needed instant response. And of course, they hired Mandiant, or he wouldn't be in this textbook. And so the team traveled there. They have a containment plan. They immediately wanted to stop the attack in progress, then do a comprehensive investigation, then an eradication event, and it took them 2 months for the incident response. So, it takes a while to dig the hole that deep, and it takes a while to fill it in. And it's not for amateurs. So the investigation team has to search for indicators of compromise. What you do is you analyze something like the malware, and then you find indicators of compromise are simple, easily detected things, like it leaves a file with this name on the system. It leaves a trace in the memory. It makes a network connection to this address. You find simple things you can easily detect, and then you run a script on a whole system. Do you have this file? Do you have this network connection going on? You run a script every week, quickly decide which machines are infected by this stuff. They analyze the network traffic for more than 10 internet points of presence, analyze all the malware, understand the financial systems. It's quite a job. Then they made a containment plan, worked with the investment team to make a more comprehensive approach to the overall remediation, and then they implemented a sweeping eradication event which took 2 days. After 2 months of preparation, they have the event where they say, okay, now reflash, re-image all these systems, change all these firewall rules, update this stuff, and suddenly, poof, the bad guys are kicked out. And they're all this planning to not take down the company business, because you don't want to shut down everything for 2 months. That would probably be fatal. So you try to work in a way that will not prevent the company from doing business during this time. So that's the first case there to talk about. Let me check for questions. You need a bit more time to process. Okay, yeah, all right. How often are credentials given to attackers via spear phishing IT help desks? Well, I don't know, but that I would call social engineering, if you're calling the help desk and trying to get credentials. And that is not the most common thing. What's far more common is to send them a link and they'll click on the link, or a file that they'll download and run. That's what you usually do. You usually get them to take a malicious action. You don't usually get them to tell you a secret. In principle, that can be done, but that's not the most common one. Okay. All right. Here it's 1:43. Let's take a 10-minute break. I'll pick up at 1:55. I need to step out. And